Bioshock. It is the GOAT for good reason. There's underwater eugenics antics like no other, some deep philosophical stuff, and it really makes you feel like a genetically engineered clone bastard of Palpatine. The crux of the story is finding Andrew Ryan, the creator and owner of Rapture, after crash landing in the middle of the ocean under suspicious circumstances, and discovering Objectivist paradise, Rapture. Ryan has a unique philosophy and a keen eye for architecture that he's nice enough to play for you on your ride under the sea.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow?
Spoiler alert, everything goes to hell. Turns out, not having regulations or a strong central government leads to mayhem and mob rule. Who would have thought? Well, not Andrew Ryan. As payment for his contribution to society, you find him and kill him because he's your big daddy and you're just a mind-controlled pawn. But why did we have to kill him? Well, this is what we call a metaphor. It reflects something in real life. Ayn Rand. So, why Ayn Rand? Why did the developers go through all the trouble to make an entire video game where the point is to crash a plane in the ocean, go to the bottom of said ocean, and kill Ayn Rand? Bioshock is a cutting critique of Ayn Rand and her brand of philosophy she called Objectivism, which, in a nutshell, is the belief that every person should act in their own rational self-interest and that is morally justified. It doesn't seem like too much of a leap from what people do normally, right? As someone who has actually read Atlas Shrugged, more like Fontaine Shrugged, I'm an expert in all things Ayn Rand and can tell you in excruciating detail how great her philosophy is. Of course, I'm kidding. This is going to be part one of a several-part series where I break down the major philosophical ideas in Bioshock, and the best place to start is with an understanding of the philosophy that started it all. Welcome to Gamerture Philosophy, and today we'll cover who was Ayn Rand and what the hell was she talking about. Ayn Rand was born Elisa Zinovievna Rosenbaum in Russia before the Communist Revolution. Her family was Jewish and owned a pharmacy until the communist government took it away and they were forced to flee to Crimea. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. They regularly faced starvation and poverty as a result of the communist policies, and as things escalated, she was expelled from Petrograd State University in the purging of bourgeois students. For those of you who don't know, the bourgeois are an upper class consideration in communist ideology. So if you're coming from money, or if they think you're coming from money, they label you as bourgeois, while the common people are known as the proletariat. She came to America with a visa to visit family and ended up staying, getting married, and prolifically writing plays, novels, and hard philosophy. Not that it's hard to understand, but hard as in technical. And most of her writings and her philosophy stems from this severe and intense hatred of collectivism and communism. And you can understand that because she and her family suffered firsthand under the communist regime, as she saw how the justifications for the greater good usually led to her not being able to eat. With this personal history in mind, you can begin to frame her perspective in writing so strongly against any form of collectivism, whether it's enforced by the government, society, or religion. This is the foundation of her brand of hyper-individualism and reverence for selfishness. Having experienced supposed selflessness at the hands of communists, it makes sense that she would distance herself as far as she could from anything reeking of the idea. And I'm sorry for doing a bit of psychoanalysis, but I'm trying to build some empathy towards her and her persona in her fight against communism. When I was going through my philosophy degree, no one took Ayn Rand seriously, just broadly. She was always laughed off as this frivolous writer who was a so-called philosopher. And I never quite understood how she was just written off, just easily like that. Until I read The Fountainhead. That's when I really changed my mind and started agreeing with philosophy, capital P philosophy as a whole. But I want to build this sympathy for her because she was a person who firsthand experienced a lot of the travesties of communism. She wasn't some conservative American saying communism is bad. Her family was persecuted and had to flee the communist regime. Everything was taken from her because of communism. So you can understand where she's coming from in her hatred and vitriol against anything that looks like communism. You see this disdain in her most famous works, Anthem, The Fountainhead, and Atlas Shrugged. To prepare for this video, I tried reading all three, but I finished Anthem, 7 out of 10, half of The Fountainhead, terrible, and didn't revisit Atlas Shrugged since I'd read it in high school and I was so burnt out from The Fountainhead and disgusted by The Fountainhead. I know I'm a failure, but let me give you the breakdown of events because it wasn't for lack of reading ability. Heck, I read a 400-page book in 2 days. I can turn pages easily enough when what's on the next page is more interesting than the page I'm on, which I can't say was the case for The Fountainhead. So I was reading through The Fountainhead, and for some reason I thought it was only 500 pages. So I thought, yeah, I'll be able to bust through this. I made it to page 400, and I was like, okay, this is brutal. I gotta finish this. I can make it through the last 100 pages. And then I saw it was actually over 700 pages, and I threw in the towel. What I experienced with The Fountainhead just shut me off so hard from reading the rest of the book. This is coming from someone who has read Stormlight Archive, 10 of the 14 books of The Wheel of Time, Heidegger, Hegel, Foucault, Nietzsche. I can read difficult stuff. The Fountainhead was I'll get into it in my review, but yeah, I had to stop and move on with my life because I couldn't handle any more abuse at the hands of Ayn Rand. If nothing else, all you need to know about Ayn Rand is that the greater good is a fun euphemism for oppression. And we can see this developed in Anthem. In 1937, Ayn Rand wrote Anthem, and this is probably one of my favorite works by her. And even since reading it in high school, I think it still holds true. Definitely my favorite of her works. It was written in 1937, and it's talking about the post-apocalyptic future where collectivism takes hold. If you've read Harrison Bergeron, think that, but more drawn out. It's still a solid 7 out of 10. If you want to read it, I definitely recommend it, but it's short. It's 105 pages. It's not too big of a waste of time. As I'm reading through this book, the idea is that the ego, the individual, has been abolished, essentially. Everyone is treated as equals. The word I doesn't even exist because it's so taboo to think of yourself as an individual. You have to always think of your group, and you never separate from your group. And this is an oversimplification, but this is the whole crux of it, that Ayn Rand saw the growing trend towards collectivism where the whole is greater than the individual, and this is what she thought was the logical outcome of that. In 1946, she wrote a new foreword for the book, in the edition that I have, and I wanted to read some passages out of it that really paint the picture for what she saw and what she was worried about. The greatest guilt today is that of people who accept collectivism by moral default, the people who seek protection from the necessity of taking a stand by refusing to admit to themselves the nature of that which they are accepting, the people who support plans specifically designed to achieve serfdom but hide behind the empty assertion that they are lovers of freedom with no concrete meaning attached to the word, the people who believe that the content of ideas need not be examined, that principles need not be defined, and that facts can be eliminated by keeping one's eyes shut. They expect, when they find themselves in a world of bloody ruins and concentration camps, to escape moral responsibility by wailing. But I didn't mean this. Those who want slavery should have the grace to name it by its proper name. They must face the full meaning of that which they are advocating or condoning, the full, exact, specific meaning of collectivism, of its logical implications, of the principles upon which it is based, and of the ultimate consequences to which these principles will lead. They must face it, then decide whether this is what they want or not. In a brief story recap for Anthem, our protagonist, a man named Equality 7-2521, is a street sweeper. He always had aspirations of making new discoveries, helping the society out, but the government decided that he was going to be a street sweeper, even though he was the best in the class, and specifically because he was best in his class. So as he's street sweeping, he comes across a tunnel, and in that tunnel there are some artifacts of this ancient world, and he starts toying around with them and learns to read, learns to invent electricity, and gets banished for his efforts. Goes on top of a mountain with his wifey that he finds, and they live happily ever after. And near the end of the book, in his discovery of his self, his ego, the word I, he talks about the purpose of existence, what he has learned, and this is the encapsulation of the whole book. I know not if this earth on which I stand is the core of the universe, or if it is but a speck of dust lost in eternity. I know not and I care not, for I know what happiness is possible to me on earth, and my happiness needs no higher aim to vindicate it. My happiness is not the means to any end. It is the end. It is its own goal. It is its own purpose. Neither am I the means to any end others may wish to accomplish. I am not a tool for their use. I am not a servant of their needs. I am not a bandage for their wounds. I am not a sacrifice on their altars. I am a man. This miracle of me is mine to own and keep, and mine to guard, and mine to use, and mine to kneel before. Whatever road I take, the guiding star is within me. The guiding star and the lodestone which point the way. They point in but one direction. They point to me. But the idea of individualism is paramount here, and you get to see the beginnings of Ayn Rand's idea of rational self-interest, objectivism. The idea that everybody is a means to their own end, much like Kant in his axioms, talking about how people should not be used as a means to an end, but are an end in themselves. She's drawing upon that and saying that man is the ultimate measure of everything. Each person is the most important part of the universe. Each person should act according to their own desires, yet not infringe on other people, but whatever. This is the beginning. This is your starter kit to get into The Fountainhead and into Atlas Shrugged. And now onto The Fountainhead. I have very mixed feelings about this book. I read Anthem in high school, and then when I graduated high school I read Atlas Shrugged, and I didn't pick up The Fountainhead until many years later, this year. And it's explained in here that Atlas Shrugged is the longer version of The Fountainhead. The Fountainhead is the more refined vision for what Atlas Shrugged is proposing. And as I'm looking at this Centennial Edition on my desk, I can't help but think about the masturbatory praise that's all over this book. The Game of Thrones quote comes to mind, insert that here.
Any man who must say, "I am the king," is no true king.
But on the back of the book it says, "The Fountainhead is a great and challenging novel based on the supreme belief in the rights of the individual." And then inside of the folds of the book, the last paragraph talks about how these are important characters of a truly great book. There are many minor characters, each one faultlessly etched with a sure and revealing pen. Ayn Rand has written a dramatic, action-filled book of tremendous scope against the fascinating background of a profession heretofore little described in fiction. You may never know the living counterparts of these characters in their entirety, but you will recognize many a facet of them in the people you meet. You may never know a love affair like that of Rourke and Dominique, yet in these pages it will be as real to you as the house you enter tonight, as the office building you go into tomorrow. Whether you hate it or love it, you won't forget this novel, and you will remember above all its timely expression of impassioned faith in the individual. And it doesn't really get much better than that. In the introduction, this is cited as being the magnum opus of Ayn Rand. Another fun one, an excitingly dramatic novel. This book is based on the challenging belief in the importance of selfishness, on the provocative idea that man's ego is the fountainhead of human progress. Period. You should have ended the book there. And this is coming from somebody who is sympathetic to Ayn Rand and her ideas. I just feel like The Fountainhead is just stroking of an ego to the maximum, and I'm going to give you my mostly unbiased, but everything's biased, thoughts about this book. And just like with the Anthem, I'm going to read parts of the introduction to give context into what Ayn Rand herself wrote about the book. And again, she reiterates the same idea that man is an end unto himself. And then she talks about man worship in the sense of glorifying and admiring people who are able to accomplish a lot, exemplary individuals. In the closing paragraphs, she says, "It is not the nature of man, nor of any living entity, to start out by giving up, by spitting in one's own face and damning existence. That requires a process of corruption whose rapidity differs from man to man. Some give up at the first touch of pressure, some sell out, some run down by imperceptible degrees and lose their fire, never knowing when or how they lost it. Then all of these vanish in the vast swamp of their elders, who tell them persistently that maturity consists of abandoning one's mind, security of abandoning one's values, practicality of losing self-esteem. Yet a few hold on and move on, knowing that that fire is not to be betrayed, learning how to give it shape, purpose, and reality. But whatever their future, at the dawn of their lives, men seek a noble vision of a man's nature and of life's potential. There are very few guideposts to find. The Fountainhead is one of them. This is one of the cardinal reasons of the Fountainhead's lasting appeal. It is a confirmation of the spirit of youth, proclaiming man's glory, showing how much is possible. It does not matter that only a few in each generation will grasp and achieve the full reality of man's proper stature, and that the rest will betray it. It is those few that move the world and give life its meaning, and it is those few that I have always sought to address. The rest are no concern of mine. It is not me or the Fountainhead that they will betray. It is their own souls." It was after reading this that I knew something was wrong. The individualist that I want to be is someone who is enabling of everybody, not exclusive, and I'm not trying to single people out. I'm not trying to downtrod the downtrodden. I want every person to see within themselves the means with which they can become better. I thought Ayn Rand shared that view, but it turns out Ayn Rand only cares about her elite chosen few, the people who are the earth movers, and only them. The way that she talks is so, and I've never used this so earnestly, arrogant, that it is off-putting to an extreme amount. This is where my thoughts on Ayn Rand soured, and it only got worse the more I read of The Fountainhead, where I saw every single one of the praises that are slathered all over the book was just fabricated. These aren't perfectly created characters. They're one-dimensional, chiseled from granite. They're terrible. These people aren't humans. The love story between Dominique and Henry is not something that happens in real life and is borderline abusive. The whole thing is so messed up, and after learning more about Ayn Rand's personal life, you can start seeing some mirrors in how she treated her spouse and what Dominique, her self-insert OC, does with Henry and Peter Keating, and it just goes downhill from here. And it's not even that I'm trying to make an ad hominem, it's that there's so much wrong here, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell went wrong. The further I read, the more this just convinced me that I didn't need to read any further, and it reached its peak at chapter 8 and chapter 9. This is the most damning section of the book, and I'm making a bet to my future self right now that these characters are heroes and villains in this story. Howard Rourke, Ellsworth Toohey, Dominique Francone are immutable, chiseled from granite, and cannot change. The only person I think may be able to change is Peter Keating, but I think that's going to be a condemnation rather than a virtue. And it's specifically because of what happens in chapter 8 and chapter 9. And I'm even going to discount Peter Keating as being one of the protagonists. He's a secondary character. He's not even a foil to Howard Rourke. He is Howard Rourke in a foggy mirror, as it were. Let's just get the caricatures out of the way, because that's all these characters are. They're caricatures. You have Howard Rourke, who has never been uncertain about anything in his entire life. He has always wanted to be an architect, always known what he was going to do with his architecture. He never backs down. He never capitulates. He is his own guiding principle. Everyone else be damned. This is how he is at the start of the book when he gets expelled from Stanton. This is how he gets fired from Francone's architecture business, and this is how he gets turned down on contract after contract because of his uncompromising understanding of his own self-worth and the magic that he is performing by doing this architecture. Oh, and also Howard Rourke has a humiliation fetish. Dominique Francone is the female version of Howard Rourke, but with a grape fetish. Her understanding of Howard Rourke's excellence is sadistically shown through her game she plays with Howard Rourke of undermining everything that he does. And now the book will say that she is doing this out of some level of devotion to him because she understands him so dearly. The idea that just anybody would give him work is a disservice because they cannot appreciate his excellence. It would be sacrilege to let one of these plebeians have access to Rourke and his abilities. Howard Rourke should succeed and gain contracts because of the excellence within the customers that want to have him sign on, independent of what others will think of him, independent of anything else besides their own desire and their innate understanding of Rourke's amazingness. And to do this, Dominique actively sabotages him and humiliates him, which gets him off. And then we have Ellsworth Toohey. Ellsworth Toohey is the foil, the true foil of Howard Rourke. This is somebody who is excellent, who knows exactly what they need to do, and they betray their own excellence in order to undermine and maliciously pull down others who break free from the mold of the proletariat. He is a confirmed communist, which for Ayn Rand means he's a terrible person. He does everything in his power to be the great leveler of people. He is a bastard in every sense of the word. everybody who comes to him seeking assistance ends up worse off afterwards, because Ellsworth Toohey's goal is not the ennobling of others, but the degrading of others, bringing everybody down into the mud where they belong. In Chapter 8, Ellsworth and Dominique have their first real discussion about undermining Rourke, both of them doing it for their own unique reasons. Ellsworth Toohey because he needs to destroy Rourke because excellence must be suppressed, while Dominique is trying to quote-unquote destroy him as a means of ennobling Rourke. Now, the exchange between Ellsworth and Dominique is the fulcrum of the ideology in The Fountainhead. Ellsworth is telling Dominique about his view on people, and he says there's really only two types of people. And throughout the book, they're talking about just the unremarkableness of the masses, that everybody is pretty crappy and we should revel in that. Ellsworth Toohey even admits in a preceding section about how the great achievements of about 12 people have really been what has got us out of caves and into skyscrapers. And then he asks, well, what would be the humanitarian option? Having these skyscrapers and being thankful, or living in caves by swamps, because that is what most people could accomplish. And he says that there are two types of people: saints and humanitarians. I honestly think that there's a secret third group that Ellsworth isn't considering, because you have the humanitarians, which are the masses, which those are essentially the sheep. These are the useful idiots. These are the unremarkable masses. That's us, right? Anybody who isn't the most excellent specimen of ideology and humanity falls into this mass group of humanitarians. We're the sheep. You have the saints like Dominique, like Rourke, who stand up for their ideals unabashedly because they are so excellent. But Ellsworth Toohey is another one of these saints, but he's not a saint. He's a demon. If Howard Rourke is Jesus, Ellsworth Toohey is Satan, because he has all of the ability of Howard Rourke, of Dominique Francoeur, but he uses it to not ennoble humanity, but to destroy it. Which leads us to Chapter 9, which gives us insight into the development of Ellsworth Toohey, how he became this fallen angel, this Lucifer figure. And spoiler alert, Ellsworth has been an utter bastard his entire life. The chapter starts out when he was 7, and he has so much resentment towards one of his class bullies that he took the ignominious sacrifice of spraying him with water. And everyone knew that this kid was a bully and that Ellsworth was a sickly, weak child, and so he kind of got a slap on the wrist, but he was doing the right thing, bringing down the mighty. David versus Goliath, where you have sickly Ellsworth standing up to the injustice of excellence expressed in a childhood bully. Ellsworth, throughout this whole chapter, is nothing but what he is and what he has always been, which is a manipulator, a schemer, someone who looks to bring out the worst in people, actively dissuading them from following their dreams and their passions, and ruining lives in the process, all in the name of some higher virtue of ennobling the masses. You're trying to make everybody lose themselves, lose their excellence, so that no one is better than anybody else and no one is different from anybody else. Ellsworth is exceptional in his ability to understand his own exceptionality, and he can recognize it in others, which makes him a perfect tool, like a scalpel, to excise that excellence and bring people to their baser selves. And this is where, on principle, I have to stand up against this book, because it's already been hinted at in the introduction written by Ayn Rand that she's not writing to the people who don't understand what's in this book. She's not writing to the masses. She's writing to the exceptional few. In her mind, the 12 people who have moved society forward in leaps and bounds, while the idiot masses just chew cud. The good are good because they've always been good. Howard Rourke is Howard Rourke because he has always been Howard Rourke. He has never been challenged in any meaningful way. His convictions have never been strained. He has always known exactly what to do, and he always acts that way. He always acts in his own self-interest. Ellsworth Toohey has always been a black-souled bastard, ripping down others with their good intentions, and he masks it in piety when he's doing the most damnable sin. But he's always been this way. He's always done this. These people do not have character arcs. Howard Rourke is going to be the same person at the end of the book as he was at the beginning of the book. Ellsworth Toohey is going to be the same person throughout the entire book. These are flat characters, lifeless characters. And it talks to the greater issue that I have with any type of philosophy that heightens the individual. I am super individualistic. I believe that everybody has in their own power the ability to make themselves great. Greatness is within each and every person, and it is our choice and our actions that lead us to greatness. We are always in the act of becoming. For Ayn Rand, it's a closed system that has no differences. Nothing changes, nothing develops. You are either born excellent or you are born a failure. You cannot jump between these castes, and that's disgusting to me. I want my work to be heard by many people because I want to ennoble every single person into becoming a Howard Rourke. But just like in my Parthenax video, what's the point of being a Howard Rourke if you never had to learn anything to get there? And it's not saying Howard Rourke is lazy or anything like that. Having experienced failure time and time again and overcome it. Someone like Peter Keating, who's written off as this mewling idiot who rides on the success of others, even though he was graduating at the top of his class in Stanton. He has the ability, but his own self-doubt and his desire to please others undermines his excellence. These are things that Howard Rourke has never experienced. He is exceptional because he is. The same thing from the Bible. Before Abraham was, I am. Howard Rourke has always been perfect, has always been amazing. But that's not what happens in real life. And the goodness, like in Candide, if it's never been tested, is it actually goodness? Your own abilities, if they've never been tested, if you've never been pushed to your limit, how do you know what your limits are? Or how do you know that you can break past your limits? I'm rambling at this point, but the idea that there's a whole 99% of people can just be written off is appalling to me. I want that 99% to excel, and they should have icons that they can look toward to identify with and say, hey, they made it, I can too. For Ayn Rand, it is absolutely closed, which goes at odds with her love for laissez-faire capitalism. She's got a hard-on for laissez-faire capitalism, yet ontologically, everything is fixed. There is no company that could become better and take over the market. There are the companies that will have always been great that will never not be great. And then there's everybody else who's a bunch of idiots chewing on their toes. I think this is a fundamental betrayal of humanity. And for someone who talks about rational self-interest, for someone who's lauding the fact that the individual is the fountainhead of all purpose and all creativity and all meaning, that fountainhead is only for the amazing people who have never had to struggle a day in their lives. And I'm not talking about struggling as they haven't had to work hard. They haven't had to struggle with overcoming themselves to become something better. They have peaked and they will never change. Peter Keating should be the protagonist of this book. Someone who has the ability within them to be better but has shortcomings and has failures. And he's done some horrible stuff like killing Mr. Hire through yelling at an old man who's senile. That's horrendous. That's terrible and that's not forgivable. But I think his position is something that would resonate with a lot of people, and showing how you could overcome that self-doubt and become something great, because I truly believe that that's what everybody can do. That door is shut because they had the self-doubt to begin with. The beauty of Ayn Rand's worldview is that you can suss out the people who aren't truly exceptional, because if they make a mistake, oh, they weren't really the right people. They were a wolf in sheep's clothing. And this will come into play when I'm talking about Bioshock, but you shore up any assault against your ideology by pointing out any of these people who have gone crazy with power and say, oh, if they have fallen, then they weren't actually the people I was talking about anyways. I'm talking about this figure. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, like a lot of cults will use, a lot of religions will use, so that you can't break free. You cannot assail their position because they can always weasel their way out of it. Ayn Rand is guilty of the same logical fallacies of all of the religions that she despises so heavily, of communism, of every weak person that she's not writing for. Because if you don't understand the Fountainhead, it's because you're too stupid to get it. It's the ultimate Redditor approach where they're so much better than you that if you don't like what she wrote, it's not because you have a nuanced opinion on it. It's just you're too stupid to understand the greatness that's being presented to you, and it wasn't meant for you because you're not the intended audience. That's reserved for the truly exceptional like us. And I still have to read the rest of the book, but 360 pages in, I can say this is the most anti-individualistic, anti-human book I have read. And I'm not excited to go through this garbage because there's no character arcs. It begs the question in the technical sense where it's assuming its conclusion at the start of its argument. And I think it's a failure on all fronts. It's a vanity project that fetishizes excellence and doesn't take into account the road that you get to excellence. It is chosen before you are born whether or not you will succeed or fail. That is not a world that I want to live in. Coming from someone who enjoyed Ayn Rand when I was younger, who is sympathetic to the ideals of people operating under rational self-interest, that people should act in their own self-interest because that's how they actually do stuff. I think everybody, taken into the context that I approve of, Ayn Rand is more palatable than what other people would give her credit for. But now that I've read most of The Fountainhead, I'm actually in with the other group. I've proven myself wrong that I think this is an abomination, which ties in amazingly with Bioshock and their critique of Ayn Rand's ideas and Ayn Rand's writing, because it is a mess and it should be attacked and it should be taken down brick by brick until nothing is left. And not in the sense like Dominique says in Howard Rourke's Trial, because it's you're casting pearls before swine and not getting a pork chop in return, but because this is like the work of Ellsworth Toohey, and when asked what do you think of Ayn Rand, the proper response should be, I don't. And now I've thoroughly convinced myself as I've been recording this section about the Fountainhead that I'm not actually going to reread Atlas Shrugged. It is far too long. It has been admitted by Ayn Rand herself that the Fountainhead is the better version of Atlas Shrugged. So whatever you could learn from Atlas Shrugged and that bloated corpse, you can pick up just as good in this mummified monstrosity. Between Anthem and the Fountainhead, I lost all of my respect for Ayn Rand as a thinker, and a part of me wishes I could go back to that naivete of thinking that I understood her after having read Anthem. If you want a similar experience, just read Harrison Bergeron. That covers the point that Ayn Rand is trying to make much more succinctly. As a much better writer said, brevity is the soul of wit, and Ayn Rand is nothing but verbose. And now at this point, I have realized this video has gone on far too long, so I have to cut it here. Tune in next month for my analysis into Bioshock's critique of Ayn Rand, and specifically in a few characters that they have, and where they go right, where they go wrong. I think this is going to be a 4 or 5 part series on Bioshock. There's so much fertile ground here to cover that I'm super excited for it. So stay tuned next month when I drop the actual Bioshock video critiquing Ayn Rand, but I felt like we really needed to set the groundwork for who Ayn Rand was and what she's talking about, because she's either dismissed too easily or lauded in a semi-religious way, and I wanted to cut into the middle of that. Like and subscribe, and if you send it to 5 friends, I will give you a crisp high five. I love you.